I am Agnes Dickinson. I'm president of the Lambton Farm Safety Association. And this is Sarah.
I'm Sarah Jackson. I am current president of the Lambton Federation of Agriculture. We'd like to welcome you here tonight.
And we are videotaping tonight, but it is only for the use of the Federation, and they will be very discreet as to what they videotape. So no worries there. And they would like to, at the end of the meeting, if there's anyone who's willing to give a couple of comments on the meeting, if you'd let us know, then we'll set you up with them at the end. Okay, so now we'll turn it over to Loren Van Hewick, and she is going to kind of chair the meeting tonight.
Thanks, Agnes and Sarah. Good evening, everyone. What an incredible turnout. This shows that there are some people who are really willing to meet us where we're at, to continue to be part of the both rural and urban communities where we care for one another. Mental health is not an easy topic all the time to talk about. I am a registered social worker as well as a director at Lambton Federation of Agriculture. So I have the great privilege of hearing people's story and helping them figure out what they're really good at and their strengths and how we can use those strengths to overcome some of the struggles. Tonight we are going to have Christy Heemstra speak with us about a very incredibly touching story, and I hope that we will really glean from it the hope that we have in sharing her precious son's story, Jordan. So Christy, if you don't mind coming now and sharing with us, we appreciate that very much.
Hello everyone. So as you know, my name is Christy. I come from Aylmer, just south of London. So almost about 2.5 years ago now, on September 23, 2016, my son Jordan took his life. Jordan was 17 years old. He was just starting grade 12. He was 3 weeks into his grade 12 year. And he shocked his family with his death. He shocked his friends with his death. The school community was, everybody was so shocked. His church community, everybody did not understand or expect this. So what I'd like to do though is just share a few pictures of Jordan so you get an idea of what kind of young man he was and a little bit about myself. So on your left there is my daughter Caitlin. She is now 21. And my husband Chris. And Justin is there. He is 23. And then there's Jordan holding his best bud, Toby. So Jordan, he was the type of young man that always had the twinkle in his eye. So when he's coming in with a bunch of friends, he does something kind of silly. So this was one of the family things. There was a thing on our farm, the stocks, so he was just misbehaving, which, by the way, we own a bee place, so it's behaving. He's supposed to promise to behave. This was the last winter with us, and I don't know how he photobombed that. He was pretty good timing there. This one here is my sister's in the middle there. She does a youth praise team, and she said after when she saw that picture, she had no idea that Jordan was back behind them. Jordan was very musical. He learned how to play the trumpet, the piano. He's there playing the keyboard with his burgundy and gray striped shirt. And then when he turned 15, he decided he wanted to learn how to play the accordion. So he bought himself one and learned by YouTube. This was about 3 months before he died. He played the accordion for his grandparents' 50th anniversary. Now, this was a Europe trip that the grade 11 class did in the spring to the history tour. So he's in Amsterdam. I'm sure he had some friends help him climb that eye. And here was a proud moment for him. We have some windmill towers on our farm, and his dad, of course, let him climb the windmill tower and take some pictures. So sometimes with depression, they say you don't do the things that you love anymore. So Jordan, he did not stop this is his youth group. They went to the Arcade in London and serving food to the homeless. And his leader said Jordan was the top 3. He always answered all her questions, postings, went to all the events, and he still did all the events until he passed away. So he was very involved with things like that. He was a photographer. He learned on his own, and I'm a proud mama. So there's some pictures of some of our farm animals that he took. And then this came up on his Facebook feed, and I could not figure out why he has an advertisement for a car. It turns out that's my car. So Kia actually asked to use his photo, and it was a proud moment for him. There is the sunset that he took. And this one is something we kind of remember Jordan by. It's actually a picture we put on his tombstone. But I think we did it with his cell phone. It's on top of the Imperial Tobacco Factory in Ilmer because we rent a space there. And he took the sunset on top of the building holding his camera. We have a lot of staff, so of course we have to train the staff how to fire an extinguisher, or use a fire extinguisher. And of course when Jordan gets a hold of it, he shoots his Keith, one of the managers. And this was taken in June, so just a few months before he passed away. Jordan, he was your average teen, a 17-year-old. He had acne. His voice cracked the poor guy pretty badly. He wasn't the most popular kid, but he did have his set of friends. He wasn't athletic. He was more of the musician type. And he was not bullied, if anyone thought that. But he just had his nice group of friends. I had to throw this one in there because that's one of my favorite pictures. We used to take selfies together whenever we go on holidays. So this is my last picture to show you of Jordan. He took this one himself. And I don't know if he planned to take it or the reason why he took it this way. But if you notice on one side of his face it's light. On the other side of his face it's dark. And that is how I think of Jordan, is that on the outside he showed his lightness, that everything was going just fine. But inside it was very dark inside, and we did not know. So I know a little bit about what Jordan was going through, a little bit from some of his notes and what his letter was to me. But so just so that you know, I knew 5 weeks before Jordan died that he was suffering from depression. And it really only came about is that he told Keith, the guy who was shooting the water, he opened up to Keith just randomly. So as soon as I knew, the next morning he called the doctor and we were getting help for him. But he still ended up feeling no hope. So I know that he was suffering from depression. I witnessed a panic attack when he actually opened up to me his struggles. I did not know he didn't feel confidence or he didn't feel self-worth until I read some of his letters after. I had no idea. I know he was hearing untrue voices. He hid his pain. He did not ask for help very quickly at all. And I think he had this pain that would not go away. And I pray that Jordan knew it wasn't his fault, because it is an illness. So because mental illness kind of came crashing down in our family 2 years ago, I've learned a little bit more and some things that people told me, that this is just a simple way. I'm just talking about depression mostly here tonight. So if none of you suffer from depression, well, that's wonderful. Maybe you don't know much about it. So here's just a little bit of about depression. So we go about our day, our nervous system goes about 100 kilometers an hour. But when you're suffering from depression, your body just shuts down to about 20 kilometers an hour. You just get sluggish. You don't mean to have this happen, and you get negative thoughts. Nothing seems fun anymore, and you just don't see the point of trying. You sleep too much, not enough. Maybe you eat too much, not enough. You feel bad about yourself, worthless, helpless, hopeless. And you may be thinking of death or suicide. And if anyone ever is thinking about that here, please, you got to talk to someone. Now, depression does not mean automatically someone is suicidal. That is not it at all. You can be suffering from depression and you don't go to thoughts of death. But in Jordan's case, he did. So let's say, I'm gonna pick on Grace because I know her name. So this is my friend Grace. So let's say, Grace, you walked in today and you slipped on the ice out there and you were pretty sure you broke your leg. So you're walking in and you're trying to tell me, or you're trying to tell others here, I broke my leg. And I say to you, would you just shake it off? It's all in your leg. That sounds a little silly, doesn't it? Yeah, you can't tell someone who's broken their leg, just shake it off, it's all in your leg. It's the same thing with mental illness or someone that's suffering. You can't tell them to shake it off, it's all in their head. It is an illness. This one is what makes me think of Jordan, which I mentioned to you. Oh, I did mention to you 5 weeks before. So I'll first describe this one. So let's say I have a cold. And you know what? I'm just going to fight this on my own. Then the cold turns into the flu. And I'm not going to tell anyone I'm sick. I'm just going to fight this all on my own. And then the flu turns into pneumonia. You know what? I've got a Dutch heritage. I am so strong. I can fight this pneumonia without getting any help. Well, I think we all know what could happen if you don't take care of pneumonia, right? You could actually get very sick and die. So this is sort of with Jordan. I'll use this one. So he did open up to his girlfriend that he thinks that already in grade 10, he was feeling something wasn't right. Grade 10. I didn't see anything. And he, thankfully he said this to her, and he said to her that he doesn't understand why, because he has a good family and a good life. He doesn't understand why things are not quite right. What would have happened if Jordan, let's say, was in the cold stage, and he just happened to share with someone at that time? Maybe we could have gotten help for him earlier. Right now, the outcome doesn't matter. But this is why I shared Jordan's story, is because it's so, so important that if you find something's not right, to please tell someone. Now, when I started sharing the story, it was mostly for, it was actually teens, and lately it's been more adults. But I wanted to keep this up for if you have children or if you have grandchildren, that you know it's for adults too. It's very important that you share with someone that you trust. It might not be a family member. It might be a friend, a co-worker. But for the teens, you know, it's generally they don't tell the parents, but they have to you tell a family member, tell a teacher, tell a coach. Just tell someone that you find is safe and that you trust them. It's so important not to leave it until it gets to the pneumonia stage. There's Kids Helpline, Reach Out Helpline, and then if you want a Christian organization, there's Shalem, and there's Christian counseling services that you can get help from. So because of our business, we have a lot of customers, and we're out there. But it was amazing, all the messages that we got of those actually that are suffering, and they're trying to comfort Chris and I on what Jordan might have been feeling. So I did ask a few of them. I said, you know, I'm talking to, start off as teens. What can I say to them? What is important if they're suffering from depression? And one woman said this is her favorite quote, that there is no shame in asking for help. It's the most courageous thing you'll ever do. And it's true. You're very strong if you ask for help. So we're just going to have a little fun here. It's thumbs up if you think it's true, thumbs down if it's false. So depression is just a character flaw, and you just should be able to snap out of it. False, of course. Struggles with mental illness are often treatable. True. You should wait until things get really bad before you tell someone and get help. You guys should all know that's false. Thank you. Now, I kept the old in here because this is with the teens, but you have to be old to be affected by mental illness. That's false. This is about a week after Jordan died. I had a woman come up to me and she said, Christy, we go to Clover Mead all the time, and my daughter, we just heard about Jordan's story, and her 6-year-old said to her, oh, I thought about killing myself. 6 years old. It's amazing. It can be any age that someone is suffering. There's a whole bunch of things that going on with that girl, and all of a sudden mother's like, oh my goodness, we got to see that doctor. So you should never be alone with dealing with what sadness you're dealing with. That's a bit of a tongue twister. So you should never be alone, and that is true. So I'll use for me, and even just for grief is that I had to have a backup plan if my husband was gone. I became an empty nester suddenly. He was my youngest, Jordan, and I became an empty nester. So Chris had to go to some meetings. I had a backup plan if I didn't. Not that I was suicidal, but just that the grief would overcome me, and I had a backup plan. If I need to call my sister over or say, can I come visit you? I don't want to be alone. It's just you don't want to be alone with whatever tremendous sadness that you are dealing with. And mental illness is no one's fault. It's very true. It is no one's fault. So I just want to talk a little bit about the other side. So if no one has suffered from depression, wonderful. So can you guys be the light? Can you be the light to those that are in darkness? So I wanted to show you this. Jordan had 2 girls in his class that just had to put their grief into something. And they put this shirt together. So this side is his camera, and then there's the scene with Jordan on top of the factory. But the other side, they did a lighthouse theme with the keyboard, Jordan's favorite color, but it says not all wounds are visible. So they do this for donations, a charity fundraiser. But it's very, very important for them to, with the lighthouse, is about to be the light. So from this was just a couple months after my husband, Chris, just composed a poem. And I'd like to read this to you. Oops, I went a little bit ahead, but I'll read that to you in a moment. So I think we all know about being a light. We all know we're supposed to be kind to one another, right? Respect one another, whether it's someone you know or someone you don't. So that's about us being a light to others. Do you know, if someone ever comes up to you about their struggles, just listen. Don't judge. Just hear them out. That's all I need to hear, is that someone cares and listens. My 4th one here is the heart attack one. This came up, actually, I was thinking of Jordan's friends. Oh my goodness, what would they have done if Jordan went up to them and said, you know, I'm thinking of killing myself. What would the friends know what to do? So I'm going to use this one. Danielle, I don't know if you want to act out. You don't have to. So I've had some teens do this. They pretend they have a heart attack. You can fall on the ground. You don't have to. So Danielle's having a heart attack. Oh, she's in so much pain. And you're going to tell Grace, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
Okay, don't tell anyone. Now she's having a heart attack and she's on the ground. Are you going to listen to her?
Probably not.
What are you going to do, Grace?
I would call 911.
You're going to call 911. Thank you, Danielle. That was so easy. Great acting. So the thing is that if Danielle might have been telling Grace, please don't do it. What if Jordan went up to a friend and said, I think about killing myself, but don't you dare tell anyone. I'm going to be okay. And the idea is that if you think someone's coming up to you and talking about their troubles and you know things are not going well, you have to overstep them and get them help. Even if they're going to hate you maybe, dislike you, that is what you have to do. So that's like Grace calling 911. Some of those times you have to. And this is really my heart goes out to these teens. We're adults, we might not even know what to do. But what are we supposed to do if someone comes up to you and says, I'm going to hurt myself? You do have to. If you're finding things are getting out of hand, get them some help. This is the poem, the lighthouse poem that my husband created. So I'd like to read this to you. Be a beacon to fellow sailors who may feel very alone and helpless, who are going through storms on the personal sea of life. Assist them to navigate to the safe harbor of refuge. Be a light, guiding those who feel isolated, who feel the pain of mental darkness. To those who are anxious, depressed, lonely, tossed about without any hope. To those who are oh so near to crashing into the shoals of suicide. Be the friend. Share that there's no shame in mental illness so that others can openly share their pain. Share that there is help so that they can move past the danger of darkness and live again in the warmth of the light. Jesus says, I am the light of the world, so go now and share that light all around. I just want to touch on just briefly about talking about mental illness, what has happened. So there's something about just talking about it. You know, if I mention the word suicide and someone's suicidal, they're not going to take their life. It actually relieves them. It makes them feel, oh, people are actually talking about it, then maybe I can talk about it. We have the shirts in our store, and I have a little note there, and my staff is saying, you know, we've had a grandfather in tears because someone's talking about this and his grandson suffers from mental illness. We just feel people are so not relieved, not happy, but just glad that someone's talking about mental illness. And the same thing on Facebook. I think we had lots of customers that just wanted to help, and it probably makes them feel better that they can talk about it. So all the money for these shirts go to a crisis text line that just started in Ontario, started in the States, and now it's just come there, so it goes towards this. So it's 686868, 68, I can't say that too fast, but if anyone feels suicidal, they just text that, and they can have a crisis responder. And if it's serious, they actually can look on the GPS on their phone, and they actually send people there to help that person out. So I think they had over 60,000 already responses in February. And I don't have the update on that one, but in 1 week they had over 600 people that they went directly to help them. So I'm pretty excited about this. Conversations at the dinner table. I'm hoping that you might go home and say, I heard this story, and it just opened up the talk of depression, suicide with family members. I never talked about depression. I never mentioned suicide to Jordan at the table. I wish I did. Not that it would change anything, but maybe he would have felt the openness to talk to someone else. And also to get rid of that stigma a little bit, that we don't make fun of those that are suffering from any mental illness. This picture was just in the last, in grade 11, so that's his grandparents. And I just did family, friends, and community because we felt amazing support, which I kind of already touched on that. So that is actually the end of my talk. So please, if you are suffering, please tell someone if you've never talked about it. And those who are not, if you could be a light to others, what a blessing that would be. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. One of the things I really appreciate, Christy, about you mentioning just lastly there about around the dinner table mentioning suicide. One of the things we know is incredibly painful, I'm sure, is that when we just say to somebody too, it's not an option. There's a plan and purpose for your life, and we're going to help you figure that out because you're gifted. And so that boldness, you know, in the community to say to people is that we care. And Christy, we just so appreciate your willingness, your boldness to share your heart with us, and we will continue to trust that the mission of Jordan's life brings life to others.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we're going to have Danielle come up and speak. Just before she does that, I have a couple of things on the table. So I primarily worked with children at St. Clair Child and Youth, and in my private practice I primarily work with children as well. So I have a couple of resources over there. I'd be happy to give them out tonight. One of the very basic things, if you have children or grandchildren, we're noticing is that children have difficulty identifying emotion. So the very common thing is to feel overwhelmed. The very basic emotions fall into 4 categories: mad, sad, glad, and scared. So mad, sad, glad, and scared. Behind mad is often sad, right? That's the basic emotion. So if you're talking with your friends or with some younger children and they're having some difficulty, that's one of the ways that you can point them in that direction. Okay, so that's just a little tip for you. With no further ado, we're going to welcome Danielle. Danielle is part of our workplace health and safety in our region, and we're delighted that she's able to come and share with us tonight about some of the myths about mental health and all that goes with that. So, thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
And you have a mic.
I think I need to use that one as well, actually. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I just want to thank Christy for sharing your incredible story. It was extremely touching, and it's really important for all of us to continue to hear Jordan's message and your message, and as previously mentioned, to carry on his legacy. I didn't obviously have the pleasure of meeting him, but I'm sure he would be very proud of his mom right now, so thank you. As mentioned, my name is Danielle, and I'm from Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. So we are one of 4 health and safety associations in Ontario, and we work predominantly, or one of our sectors is agriculture. I come from a background, an interesting kind of weaving background with kinesiology, psychology, and my own family story as well. I think probably every single one of us here today have a story in one capacity or another about mental health. Whether it's us directly or indirectly touched by mental health, we are all a part of this conversation. And it's so exciting to be here today to hear and see your power and the power that we bring in numbers to have these conversations and to continue to bring this message forward. So again, I thank you all for being here today. A little bit about my background. I am a mental health first aid instructor. I am a psychological health and safety advisor in workplaces, and I have a kinesiology background in ergonomics. So it's this combination of body and mind that has always fascinated me. I think it's incredibly important that we start looking at body as one, not just looking at it from the neck down and forgetting about this incredible, massive, important part that sits on top of our shoulders. It was once described to me that mental health, our brain, is like our central command station, our CPU, the CEO of our organization. And when there's a broken leg, as Christy mentioned, or when there's pneumonia, or when there's something going on, or just that random itch on your back that you can't see and you have to do that awkward dance in the mirror to try and find it, what told you to look there? What was your mind? And it was your mind giving you an indication that there's something not quite right. But what happens when it's the mind? There's something going on there, or there's something wrong with the CPU. Who's going to tell that? That's the village, that's the community, that's each and every one of us here today. It's looking out for each other and being a part of that community. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but I would argue it takes a village to raise a person. And just because you hit a certain age at age 16 or 18 or 21, however you define adulthood, doesn't mean your village goes away. So no matter what age you're in, please use your community and use your supports, because it's tremendously important that we look out for each other for body and mind. So I'd like to, this always goes a little bit fast. I'd like to show you a little video here. Did we end up getting our audio put together? Where's my lady? I think so. Okay, well, we'll give it a try. If we don't have audio, then we don't have audio. But we'll give it a try. This is a little video. It speaks to just how important this conversation is for all of us, but I think Christy's already kind of made that quite clear.
I am a mother, a father, son.
Can you guys hear that?
Brother, a sister. I am a student, stay-at-home mom, construction worker, volunteer. I am loving.
Can you guys hear at the back?
Smart, funny, generous, way too generous. I am all of the amazing things you see. But there's something you can't see, or don't see. Something that I don't let anybody see. Like when I'm alone. In a room full of people. Can't get out of bed. And maybe I've gained weight. Or lost weight. Why do men always lose weight? It can get dark in here. Happy. To feel something. Anything. Nothing. Because depression isn't a mood. It's not a passing thing. Or a bad day. It's a disease. I can't just get over it. Feels like I'm underwater. Drowning. And sometimes I think you'd be better off without me.
I am telling you this, all of this,
Because I need help.
and you're my wife, my dad, my husband, my kids.
My boss.
So please, don't judge me. Leave me.
Fire me.
Please, be patient. Don't give up on me.
Just be there for as long as it takes.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't real.
So that's just a little video that reminds us of that this impacts every single one of us, regardless of profession, regardless of age, regardless of sex, gender, sexual orientation, religious background, any of it. As long as we have a mind, we have mental health, and we're here today to talk about that. So a couple of my objectives for today. I'd like to define mental health and why it's important for us to talk about in agriculture. Explore how mental health stigma impacts the farm and the home. So we'll talk a little bit about what is stigma. And then introduce some resources and support on the topic of mental health. And there's a lot at the back that we've already been able to speak to and hand out. So make sure you grab those resources. Some of them are obviously very local, so that's important. So the style of today is a myth buster. So the first one, what you'll see is each slide comes up and it's a myth. And then we will hopefully kibosh that myth and start to understand a little bit about the facts. So this first myth is that mental health problems don't affect me. And you'll see at the back there, it's a group of superheroes. I think we all have our favorite superheroes. But it's important for us to recognize that we are not superheroes and that mental health problems do affect me. What is mental health, though? And if we're going to say that it impacts me, well, why and how? So let's talk a little bit about that. First and foremost, our health is comprised of three really important areas: our social health, our physical health, and our mental health. And they're all interconnected and intertwined. All three of them have a fundamental part of who we are. And as my background in education and kinesiology would speak about, the physical body hugely influences the mental mind, and the mind hugely impacts the physical body. So if we are experiencing pneumonia, if we're experiencing cancer or any diagnosis, that's going to be a really challenging part of our everyday. Even just at what seemingly simple or easy to fix, broken leg with a cast and some time, that impacts your social life. That impacts how well you get out on winter days. That impacts your ability to enjoy every aspect of your life, and it changes it for a period of time. So all three of those factors are critically important when we talk about health. For today, we're going to focus on that one component, which is the mental health. And we know that our mental health can be impacted by a variety of different factors: our genetics, our life experiences, different times of the year can impact our mental health based on weather. There's all kinds of different factors that go into our mental health. Mental health, as defined by the World Health Organization, is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stressors of life, and work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. It's a pretty lofty definition there. So I'm going to put this out to you guys. What do you like about this definition, or what don't you like about this definition? And I won't take any offense because it's not my definition. So if you don't like it, that's okay. Just yell it out. Pardon?
Mental health, in my opinion, is a continuum.
Absolutely.
Right? So it says if we're in a state of well-being, well, we fluctuate through life. So it's a bit of a continuum rather than just a single state.
Absolutely. It's a continuum. So we've got to look at the fluctuations of what that means, what mental health means, what health means. Absolutely. Yes?
It says can cope with normal stresses of life.
Yeah.
Life doesn't always have normal stresses.
Absolutely. And what are normal stressors? Are your normal stressors the same as my normal stressors? Are our worlds similar? How or are they different? And some of us might think, okay, finances, having a family, going through, getting married, that can be a change. Having a child, those are normal stressors perhaps in everyday life. But that's not everybody's normal. Some people never have kids. Some people don't ever have financial concerns. A lot of us do, but it changes. So how do we define normal? A normal is different. What I like to say is use that as your barometer. What is your normal? And when we can look at that as a personal reflection on our own lives, then we're more likely to be able to see what that barometer is, and is it above or below my average? And that helps us to identify and recognize that this is unique to every single one of us. The next myth that I have here for you is mental illnesses are not real illnesses like cancer. And we know that they are. When we talk about mental illness, we need to recognize that there's a biological component to this. Heart disease, just another excuse for lazy people not to work. A lot of people get cancer because they just can't deal with reality. Would we ever say that? I should hope not. So why is it okay now that we switch out those words? Anxiety. A lot of people get anxiety because they just can't cope with reality. Depression. Just another excuse for lazy people not to work. Why does it seem that that's a conversation that's easier for us to have, or that we have had or we've thought of in the past? So it's really important that we recognize these statements just show us how powerful the stigma is. And we're going to hold on to that because we're going to come back and talk a little bit about stigma in a moment. But we need to recognize that there's biological background to this and that it's not just a choice. Personality weaknesses or character flaws cause mental health problems. They can just snap out of it if they try hard enough. We know that's not the case. So this speaks exactly to your point about the continuum. And that we used to see mental health ranging on a linear model, and now we're seeing it more in quadrants, recognizing the fluidity of this. So if we look at that first top right-hand quadrant, we're looking at positive mental health with no diagnosis of a mental disorder. Okay? Mental disorder, mental illness, use synonymous in these examples. And when we're sitting up there, it's important that we recognize that that could be a really positive day for any one of us. A really exciting moment, a happy moment. Things are going well for us, or maybe it's just the natural course of our day. That barometer we talked about is in a good place for us. If we move down to that bottom right-hand quadrant, we're looking at poor mental health with no diagnosis of a mental disorder. So it's important here that we recognize even without a diagnosis, we can still have poor mental health. So that's when that barometer is shifting for us. I haven't been diagnosed, but I'm struggling. How many of us have had a quote-unquote bad day? The show of hands. So I think we're all recognizing that we are all part of this continuum in one capacity or another. If we flip to the other side here, we look at diagnosis of a mental disorder and poor mental health. So we're struggling. And somewhere in between the light green to the dark green is where we made that transition. And in that case, there's more of a clinical diagnosis involved. But the key to this is not really the bottom left, because majority of the stigma actually resides in that top left, where we assume that people that are struggling are always going to stay in that dark green corner. The important thing to recognize is, as Christy mentioned, with support, with treatment and various different types of coping techniques, we can actually have a diagnosis and cope positively with our mental health and be in a really great place. And we see that through numerous different examples that have come forward in our society through the celebrities, Clara Hughes, and so all of these different individuals that speak up about their struggles with mental health, but how they've been able to overcome and work through them. The two really big spots to me are that dark blue and the light green, because that's where we don't want to talk about it. That's where the stigma really resides. We don't want to talk about the fact that I'm having a bad day, or we don't want to talk about the fact that people can be, and a lot of us live with diagnosis, but work that productive, fruitful life, meaningful life. So I'm going to just ask you to take a moment and humor me for a moment. If I could, get all of you guys to close your eyes for a moment. So I want you to think about today, February 27th, 2019. And I want you to think about where you reside on that quadrant or in this continuum. Which spot best represents your current place today? When you found that spot, hold on to it. You don't have to share it with anybody, just hold on to it. And now think back to February 27th, 2018. Where were you then? Where's your place? Where was your place? Has your place changed? Hold on to it once you found it. And then now think forward to February 27th, 2020. Where do you want to be? Find your place and hold on to it. Open your eyes. How many of your positions changed just by a show of hands? I think a lot of our positions change, right? And that's the important thing to recognize, that this is fluid and ever-changing, and it's really important that we recognize that. Now, it's also important that we recognize that we can go from that right-hand side to that left-hand side in any given time in our life, whether that be through any kind of a diagnosis of depression, of anxiety, of PTSD, of a variety of different factors. And as I mentioned earlier, that can change within any given time, month, life, or year, and expected or experiences or genetic backgrounds, a whole bunch of factors can instigate the movement from the bottom right, the light green, to the left side, that darker green, and back up again, right? So it's really important that we talk about that. And again, just one other point to emphasize that dark blue quadrant. How many people know someone with the diagnosis of diabetes, with a show of hands? And how many people know how many people know a person with diabetes that is living healthy, fulfilling lives? Absolutely. So if we can liken it to other factors, much like our broken leg example, we can start to normalize it a little bit, even though we may not have experienced it, and it seems intangible to us, we can start to understand a little bit more about what that means. So farmers don't get depressed, do they? We know that's not true either. We know they do, for a number of different factors. So there's a lot of really interesting research being done right now by the University of Guelph and Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitton, who I'm fortunate enough to sit on their stakeholder committee with, and her PhD candidate, Brianna Hagen. And they are doing some terrific stuff that I wanted to mention to you guys to let you know about. About a couple years back, I want to say in 2015, but I could be wrong on that date, so don't hold me to it. Andrea set out to do a research study on understanding producers and farmers' mental health in Ontario. She put out a survey and actually found that more producers and farmers than just Ontario wanted to do this survey. So they opened it up to be a national survey. And this national survey ended up coming back with great results into the insights of what's actually going on in agriculture with our producers and our farmers, and even veterinarians as well. And they found some pretty alarming stats. So they found that they had extremely high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety, high levels of cynicism, high levels of burnout. Does that sound familiar to anybody in here? Yeah, I think so. So what do we do about that? And I think, anecdotally, we probably all knew that prior to the research study coming out. But the fact that that was out there is now putting a little bit more concrete evidence behind it. And in comparison, not that they did a direct comparison, but if you look at other stats, just in generic stats, those stats that Andrea came up with or was able to determine were higher than the average population. So it's important that we actually do spend some specific time and look at agriculture and mental health. So as a result of that, they've been working to put together some really amazing programs. So one of which is called In the Know. The In the Know program is currently a half-day program that's specific to agriculture. All the examples or case studies are specific to the agriculture industry. And they talk about how do we respond to this? What is depression? What is anxiety? What is suicide? And how can I help someone? So much to Christy's point, some of those simple factors that we think of, or that we don't always think of, I should say, like listening, being present with someone, and knowing when to make that phone call, are all factors that they talk about, but in a little bit more depth. And so this is a half-day session. They also are offering, will eventually on the docket, is to create an online session, and perhaps a full day as well. So I just want to make sure that you know that that is being done, and it's similar to mental health first aid, but specific to the ag industry. And so I think it's really important that you keep your eyes and ears open for that, and if there's something local that you can attend, or if it comes out, then to jump on that opportunity. It's an excuse. They're unreliable, unproductive, or untrustworthy. It's fully within their control. Instead of saying those factors, why don't we think about, you look stressed, how can I help? I'm here for you if you'd like to talk. Have you thought of talking to your doctor? We're in it together. Some really simple things that we can do to make a bigger impact. Often people will say that the stigma is far worse than the illness itself because they're alone and they don't have someone to turn to. If we can pull that part of the equation out, we can help and look for the hope that we can help that person and find hope for that person. People with mental health problems are violent, unstable, or unpredictable. That's not always the case. Unfortunately, our media portrays that in many cases that people are violent, unstable, or unpredictable, and we hear those big situations, but we need to recognize that that can be a pretty judgmental factor. And if we're jumping to that and that's being a reason to prevent us from supporting somebody, we're jumping to conclusions. Unless we have reason to believe that that might be the case and that we do need to protect our own safety, let's find fact before we jump to conclusions. So this is where I like to talk a little bit about stigma. Stigma is composed of 3 different factors. So our cognition, the thoughts that we have, the emotions that are often informed by our cognitive thoughts, and our behaviors. So those, how our cognition and our emotions turn into the actions that we create. So for me, one of the things that I always like to say, if I chose only to speak to this half of the room tonight, and this half of the room, I'm just going to dismiss them, keep my back to them perhaps, not make any eye contact with them, probably not giving them the best impression, probably not telling them how worthy they are, how valuable they have, their insights are, or how thankful I am that they're here today. Instead, I'm making you feel what? Pardon? Welcomed. Yeah, welcomed or unwelcomed. I'm being dismissive, right? And as for stigma, there are 3 different factors that go into stigma, 3 different types of stigma. There's the structural stigma. So for whatever reason, I'm lucky enough to have your attention for a period of time tonight. And I get to stand in front of each and every one of you. And you are all being polite and attentive to what I'm saying. And I hold this certain level of authority over the room right now for a period of time, for a short period of time. If I use that inappropriately, if I turn my back to half of the room, if I use dismissive hand gestures or roll my eyes, those behaviors are all negative stereotypical stigma or ways that it can impact stigma. And that's based on my position. Having said that, this half of the room could also be engaging in stigma. If you don't call me out on it, if you don't say anything to me, if you don't say, Danielle, why are you acting this way? You're being kind of rude. You're engaging in soft stigma. It's that bystander effect. You're not actually doing anything about it, right? So you're, in fact, effectively, you're agreeing with me. They're not worth your time. Why would you want to talk to them? And the third level of stigma is the stigma that this half of the room portrays. Perhaps if you guys don't stand up about it, it's you telling yourself, I'm not worth her time. I don't know why she would want to talk to us anyways. So and we all have that little negative voice that sticks inside of our heads every now and then, but it's whether or not we listen to it. It's whether or not we kibosh it down, or whether we're willing to stand up against that voice. We all have stigma in us. It's a matter of recognizing whether it brings value to the situation or not, right? We all have biases that we bring. People with mental health problems do not fear that it might jeopardize their jobs. We know that's not the case. We know that at work, there's something called absenteeism when we're not there, but presenteeism when we're not there, or when we are there but we're not fully involved, invested, can be just as problematic. In this case, it says up to 7.5 times higher than absenteeism. It's anywhere between 2 to 7.5 times higher. So that cost to our businesses, to our farms, is huge, right? And it's harder to measure presenteeism than it is absenteeism. Absenteeism, they're not there. I can count the number of days they're not there. Presenteeism is measured more on self-perception surveys. Do you feel like you're working at your fullest potential, right? So it's that negative impact on performance and productivity, and it's hanging in there just to get the job done, even though I might not be working, I'm there, it's from a quality, isn't quite there, but quantity, I'm showing up, right? The other thing actually I did want to mention about this slide here is the fact when we talk about our workplaces. So our farms are not just homes, they are workplaces, right? Or I should say they're not just workplaces, they're homes too. And so it's this combination of the two that becomes so critically important. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what are the factors that are making this challenging for us? What are the factors that are making work and life more difficult? And so there are 13 workplace factors that are, regardless of sector, that have been shown to have a really big impact. Some of them can be anything from physical safety, because when we're not physically safe, we're not psychologically safe either. If we're worrying about coming home with all 10 fingers and 10 toes, then that can be a huge factor in our psychological health and safety. But also things like workload balance, recognition and reward. All these different factors that go into it. There's 13 of them. And if you're interested in more, I encourage you to take a peek at either one of two websites, thinkmentalhealth.ca or Guarding Minds at Work. We'll actually speak to both of them, which I'll show you a little bit later, or I'll put those websites up later. And the important thing to look at when we're talking about these factors is that this is not just a conversation about one or the other, work or home. They impact both. Now, when we talk to various other sectors that not just egg specific, one of the hardest things about the organizations are finding is it's really creating workplaces that are humanized. We've created workplaces that are numbered based. So you come in, you check out. But that's a little bit different in agriculture in many ways, especially for our smaller farms, is they are our homes as well. And there's a beauty in that because we have this built-in community and this support. So now it's a matter of trying to utilize that community and break down the stigma within that community, because when we talk about perhaps a barn fire, the community riles together pretty fast behind that. And sandwiches are made, and the kids are off to school, and the animals are taken care of, and the community's behind you. There's the barns put back, the rising of the barn is back up and ready to go within a given number of weeks or months, right? But when we talk about a farmer that might be experiencing depression, I don't know if I want to knock on that door. I don't know if I want to get involved. Or do I talk about it? Or if we do talk about it, it's the whispers amongst the community. But are we acting on it? So why wouldn't we look, when we look at the traumatic situations in our communities, why don't we look at them in a similar light? Why are some okay to talk about and address and come together for, but others are more challenged or challenging? I can't help. I can help is the real answer. So there's some simple little ways, some simple warning signs. And this is not an inclusive list by any means, but just a couple factors to get in there. Loss of interest or feeling low. Ordinary things just are harder to do. Taking more dangerous risks or unnecessary risks or risks that the person wouldn't have in the past. Sleep patterns change. Using alcohol or drugs to escape or to cope. And some really basic tips to stay mentally healthy. And these are things that we technically do or should do every day, but somehow we don't. Somehow they become the bottom of the barrel. Exercise regularly, eat healthy, explore relaxation strategies, catch up with our families and our friends. Take time to do things that you enjoy. When you ask yourselves the question, what is the biggest and most important asset on your farm? What's the answer? You are. Absolutely. But why is it that it takes us so long and it's the bottom of the barrel that it comes to doing the self-care that we need? Because there's so many chores on the farm that need to get done. There's so many things that happen that take precedence over that. I'm asking you today to carve a little bit of time, even if it's 7 minutes. I have a friend who is actually going to be ordained in the Anglican Church as a priest on Sunday. So I'm quite excited about that. And she will always say, for whatever reason, I don't know where she got this, but she said 7 minutes. 7. Take 7 minutes out of your day, and I don't care if you break it up, 2 and 5, 3 and 4, 6 and 1, whatever it looks like to you. Take 7 minutes out of your day and do something for yourself. Whether it's before the chores are done, after they're done, taking that minute to walk from one barn to the other. And take a moment just to actually reflect on yourself. but make it intentional. So why are we really stressed out? We've been talking about this for a while now. Well, why on the farm is this in agriculture? Why is this such a big deal? What are some of the unique challenges you face in your farm? And what contribute to the stress or poor mental health? I'm just going to put that out to you guys, and then I'll share a couple of my thoughts. What makes it more challenging? What's unique about agriculture? What's unique? Pardon? The weather, absolutely. AKA look outside. Absolutely.
Long hours.
Long hours. Do you ever get a break? Do you ever get vacation?
No.
Thank good. What else?
Quite often people have to work alone.
Working alone, absolutely. Absolutely.
Commodity prices.
Yes, absolutely. Commodity prices. Not enough sleep. Anybody else?
Financial stress.
Finances. Absolutely. It's a big one. So weather, that was one of the first ones that came to mind as well. Pressure to maintain a family farm. Generational farms, right? Animal and crop disease, that's another huge one. And that leads directly into finances, right? Farm finances. Uncertain crop and production yield. Government regulations and policies. Those are always fun. Personal family relationships. Again, other workplaces don't know their people well enough. They need to invest in getting to know their people. That's not always the same problem that the average farm has. You know your people pretty well, sometimes maybe too well. But that's actually a strength. Let's use that let's capitalize on that. Though it can be a very big challenge for us, so I don't want to dismiss that. Work-life balance on the farm, our physical health, and our mental health. So all these factors become really important for us to openly discuss and talk about and recognize that, again, this is the village right here, and it's up to us to work together through each of these factors and to support each other through all of them. So you may have heard of Stop, Think, Act before. Stop, Think, Act is kind of like behavioral-based work to help us change behaviors, really. And we use this a lot in health and safety. And so the question now is, can we talk about Stop, Think, Act from a psychological health and safety perspective? Can we talk about it to prevent mental harm from occurring on our farms? So the whole premise of STOP is before you get involved, before something bad might happen, whether it's, if we use the example of any physical hazard, before we walk into a dangerous situation, live wires or a tractor accident, what could go wrong? How bad could it be? Has anything changed? So think about that from a mental health perspective. What's my situation? Have government policies changed? How bad could this be for me? What does that look like? Think, do I clearly understand the task or the broader situation that's involved right now? Am I physically, and here's the caveat or the important part, mentally ready to do the job? That's the part we don't always ask, because I just got to get the job done. If I'm not mentally ready to do the job, I need to rally. I need to get supports in place. And I need to be able to find a little part of that. And that can be the hardest part of all of this. Because like we talked about in the beginning, who's going to tell us if our CPO's down, right? CPU. So that's when we really need to rally here. But we need to be intentional about that every single day. And as we talked about earlier, look for where those little changes are coming. Catch the cold before it comes the flu, before it becomes pneumonia. Do our best, but that's not just one person's responsibility, that's all of our responsibilities. Do I have the right tools and equipment? When we look at that from a mental health perspective, that's looking at, do I know the resources? Do I know what's available to me? And if we don't have those available resources, well, we need to rally that too. So that's where hopefully the research coming forward through things like University of Guelph and through hopefully some funding that we've been told we'll get through the government will help us, right? Make it safe, use the right tools and procedures, and reduce the risk. Ask the question if you need to ask the question. If your friend or your family member or someone you know is thinking about suicide, make it safe, right? Use the right tools and always look to reduce your risk. So some general, again, I just want to go a little bit more in depth here as I come to the end of my presentation. In that STOP piece, think about some general signs and symptoms of stress. Loss of energy, always feeling that tiredness, change in your sleep patterns, low self-esteem, feeling anxious and tense, finding it hard to make decisions. Muscle pains, tension, and headaches, that's a really big one that we don't often think about. And from a kin background, I can tell you that there's not necessarily a causation, but there's correlation and an understanding. I'm not sure what that is. Anyways, there's not necessarily causation. We don't know if it was a chicken or the egg between the back pain and depression, but we know there's correlation between the two. We know there's a relationship between muscle pain, musculoskeletal disorders, and depression and anxiety. So there's a huge relationship between the two that we can't forget about. Chest pain, high blood pressure. Often when we talk about panic attacks, people will think that it's a heart attack, but they're having a panic attack. So it's important that we make sure we're getting that person to support and perhaps the hospital. In many cases, if you think you're having a heart attack, we need to get to the hospital and make sure, actually do some tests and figure out what's going on. But chest pains are really common with panic attacks. So consider that and never take that lightly. Feeling sad, reduced motivation to work, or depressed. Worrying about little things. I struggle with anxiety myself, and I called my dad up when I was, I think, 15. And I listed off all the things that I was worrying about. And then I said, oh my God, Dad, I worry so much. It's like it just takes over every part of me. And I'm going off about how much I worry and that I'm worried about worrying. And I said that to him. And then, of course, he started to chuckle. And we both had a laugh, and it was a moment of reprieve because I was worrying about worrying. And so it's worrying about those seemingly simple and little things that really does make an impact. And to me, that was a warning sign. To me, that was going, okay, maybe I need to go talk to somebody. Maybe this isn't right. Maybe this is impacting my life in a way it shouldn't. Even skin rashes or irritations can be signs. So get it looked at. Memory, concentration problems, loss of appetite or overeating, increased smoking, drinking, gambling, social withdrawal from others. If you have a friend that's usually really active and engaged in the community and all of a sudden, or over a period of time, they're not involved, knock on their door, call them up, see how they're doing. Talk to them or maybe just listen. And then, of course, grinding or clenching of your teeth, as often seen with poor sleep habits, but also can be done during the day as well. Feeling irritable, impatient, short-tempered for no reason. So just a couple, there's lots as you can tell, but these are all little things to be aware of. And again, going back to your barometer, recognizing what is your normal and where does that change. So my last little myth here, Canadians are less aware of mental health issues than 5 years ago. And I think this is probably to me one of the most positive myths. We know that's not the case, that they are more aware. And it is because of courageous individuals like Christy and her family, and each and every one of you for being here today to talk about this. It's because of campaigns that are broader, and it's because organizations are willing to talk about it. It's because this topic has had far too long to go unnoticed, and it's finally time that this changes. And it's not going anywhere, let's be honest. This is not the flavor of the month or the color of the month. We're going to continue to talk about this. An icon for many of us, and his passing impacted every single one of us. And we didn't even know him. That's what boggles my mind. We knew him through a screen, and we kind of connected to him. But the fact is how much that impacted our lives, and we didn't even personally know him. This is a topic we have to talk about. We can't stop talking about. And it's exciting. As difficult as it is to talk about, it's exciting to talk about it because it gives us hope that there's change ahead of us. So with that, I want to leave a couple of resources for you. A little quick study that was done by CASA in 2005 showed that 30% of farmers indicate that they would speak to a family doctor. 13% indicate that they would speak to a mental health professional. And 12% indicate that they would speak to a priest or a religious figure. So think about in your community, who are those people that you would speak to? Have a bit of a game plan, because you never know when you might need to speak to someone. So is that so important? And if it's not within your community, because sometimes in our small communities, we don't always feel comfortable talking to our priest, who's also our friend's brother's sister-in-law, or whatever that might be, right? So if that's the case for you, then look at neighboring communities. Look at other areas that might be someone that you feel you might be comfortable talking to, or that you're someone that you could refer someone to as well. These are some generic resources here that I'll list quickly, and of course there's local ones that we've listed at the back as well. And these all fall under that ACT category. So Telehealth Ontario, Crisis Service Canada, there's a generic number for Ontario there. If you do happen to cross into Quebec for work or personal life, there's also a Quebec specific line. Suicideprevention.ca. Connex Ontario, often what is referred to with Canadian Mental Health Association. So that's one of the big ones that they'll use. And a really terrific one, you can go online and chat too. A lot of our younger generation prefers chatting or texting via as opposed to the phone or face-to-face conversations. So those options are available as well. 211 Ontario is a really great one. You can just either type into your browser or call directly 211. You can talk to them about mental health concerns, legal concerns, financial concerns, housing concerns. So it's kind of a little bit of a catch-all. Some really good options in there just so you are aware of. Distress Centre Ontario. This is a really great one. When you go through there, again, if your work takes you or even to different regions in the province, you can actually look up by region crisis lines and different supports. A lot of them do come back to the Canadian Mental Health Association, but recognize that you can look at the Distress and Crisis Centre for across Ontario, which is helpful. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but the Daily Chore is Handling Stress on the Farm, Agriculture, Health and Safety Network. This was created by USask, and it's a really great little booklet. It's, I want to say, about 20 to 30 pages. You can download it directly. It's based out west, obviously, but we are actually looking in Ontario to Ontarioify the resource. So keep your eyes open for that. But it goes through little personal indications. What's my current stress level? Where am I at? How do I cope positively or negatively with stress? And what are some resources? What is stress in a little bit more detail? So if you're the kind of person that likes to have something in your hands, you like to do some reading or research, that's a nice simple little one that's very ag specific. And then of course, Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. We are here as from more of an organizational perspective. We do not offer personal counseling, but we offer more work in how to create a healthy and safe workplace. Okay? And that is not just physical safety, that's psychological health and safety. We like to say that our definition of health and safety includes physical and psychological. And we always ask if that's the case at other organizations too. So when you go back to your farm, ask if your farm defines how you define health and safety. Is it just physical? Or is it also psychological? So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. And I think we'll open it up possibly for some questions to answer in a little bit. So thank you guys. I appreciate your patience and thank you.
I just wanted to take a quick opportunity to thank Danielle. I just loved her passion for mental health, and you did a fabulous job. Thank you so much. Very informative. So services in Sarnia-Lambton, as many of you are aware, there's a lot of services. A lot of them tend to be centered in more of the urban centers. So I do want to go over a few of our rural opportunities. Before I do that, I have a quick story to share with you. One of them, I'm going to name drop a bit here. I don't know if anybody remembers Joe Vi. He passed away a couple years ago. I see some nods. And Kenny Nicholson. Anyway, they are some incredible neighbors of ours. And when we first moved and started farming just outside, kind of in Moore, just outside of Brigton, we could afford to buy the farm, but we couldn't afford to buy the tractor. So one day, the storm was blowing in and the hay wasn't yet baled. And before we knew it, we had Joe Vi there, and I think Van Den Duel was there, and Kenny Nicholson was on call. And basically they got that hay all baled for us, and the rain held off. And another time I can think of is a time when we didn't have a tractor or we needed some stuff down, and so Kenny Nicholson would come down and help, or Ken would go grab his tractor and do that. And I think within the ag community, we are a pretty unique community. We do help each other well. And yet sometimes when it comes to mental health, we have difficulty asking for help. We have no trouble asking for help to move a bale of hay. We have no trouble to ask for help in getting the sprayer ready. But when it comes to to talking with one another and sharing our story, that seems to be sometimes more difficult. So I want to encourage you that just by coming here tonight, that helps and alleviate the stigma that Danielle talked about, and to not be afraid to ask for help. Okay, so one of the first ones, did that come up? It's on a Prezi. Okay. Give me 1 second here. It used to be Schmiley, 1 question mark, but it's not anymore, right? Your password on your computer? Schmiley stands for see how much I love you. Did it work? Yeah. Okay, now it's sackbut, which is a trombone, just so y'all know. Okay, so Kenny, I need you to hotspot with your phone, I think. Yeah. Okay. We'll start going through this, and then he's more technology driven. So one of the first ones is St. Clair Child and Youth Services, and they're located in Point Edward. However, they do have satellite offices. So Kettle Point is one, Petrolia, and I think down Walpole Way. I'm trying to think that they talked at one time about Albinston. I'm not sure if they got that up and running. So those satellites are for walk-in services. So if you have a child under the age of 18, or if you are a parent of a child under the age of 18, or a grandparent of a child under the age of 18, you are able to go into their walk-in clinic and get same-day service. So I used to work the walk-in, and I loved it because sometimes we would have some kids come in there, and you could tell when they walked in they were feeling very anxious, and by the end of it we would talk about their worry bully and what he says to them and how they can boss that worry bully back. And those kids would walk out of there just walking on clouds. They just felt so strong and empowered to kind of boss that worry bully back. And so I have to sing the praises of St. Clair Child and Youth Services. They really do an incredible job. So those walk-in services, the difficulty is after the walk-in services, if you would like to go on for further services, those services are located in Point Edward. So if you live in Grand Bend, it's a bit of a hike in. So that is the unfortunate thing when it comes to accessibility. We're trying to bridge some of that gap, but obviously it is an issue. So St. Clair Child and Youth Services, they offer a host of, they have the walk-in clinic, they have crisis services. So for those who, for children who do express the desire to commit suicide, and if they go to the hospital, and if at the hospital they say, I cannot keep myself safe, the child would be admitted, most likely, into Blue Water Health, into the child psych ward there. However, that ward, probably about 100% of the time, is 100% full. It is really very busy, unfortunately. So St. Clair Child and Youth has crisis services, which means within 24 hours, you would have an appointment with a clinician to begin the process of doing an assessment and figuring out what we need to do to keep somebody safe and what do we need to do to help this family cope with the situation. They also have group therapy as well. So there's anxiety groups for kids, and that is really helpful and really fun for the kids as well. After that, we have, it's not working. Oh, that part's working. There we go. So we talked there about St. Clair Child and Youth, target population. So it also is also prepartum services. So if you have somebody who's expecting a baby and is feeling anxious or is experiencing some prepartum or anticipates postpartum depression, they also offer services there for that. And we talked about, the other thing that St. Clair Child and Youth does is they are a liaison for diagnosing. So we do work with Dr. Oh my goodness, Michelle is her first name. We also work with Dr. Lacroix, and there's a doctor out of the regional mental health services in London. No, well, we do work with Dr. Hussey as well. I want to say Dr. McNeil, but that's not it, and I don't know why I can't remember her name. But anyway, she's incredible. So when we have a child who would benefit from medication or would benefit from a formal diagnosis, and I'll be honest with you, that's really not the goal when somebody comes in to our services or to St. Clair Child Needs Services, is to suddenly start diagnosing anybody. But we do have kids who benefit from diagnosis. We do see, for instance, we have a foster child. He benefits from diagnosis because it allows him to access more funding for more services. So it's not the goal, but there are times when we need that diagnosis, and so then they would see Dr. Lacroix, Dr. Hussey, for those services. And we are very fortunate in our area. We are understaffed for child psychologists, but we do have Dr. Hussey, who is an incredible psychiatrist. Okay, so on to CMHA in Sarnia-Lambton. Oh, that wasn't supposed to skip to that. I'm going to run through this real quick. It's going to get to the next slide. So CMHA, as you'll see in your program there, they offer housing support services. They also offer a transitional program for kids who have been diagnosed and we expect them to need adult services. So between those teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19, 21, they offer some bridging services so that it's a smooth transition. We actually have quite a large homeless population of teenagers in Sarnia-Lambton, which is really, really unfortunate. And there's some really good work to try and address that. But so far it hasn't been highly addressed. And so CMHA is trying to work with some other agencies to address that fact. So the next one is Family Counseling Center. They offer services for anybody who has been a victim of partner violence. So that's either physical, sexual, or emotional. And they offer free individual counseling sessions there. They also run Starting Point. So when a child is no longer able to reside in the family home for any reason, often there's a mental health or disorder or illness that's playing a role there. Then Starting Point is the group and the agency that we work with to try and solve that housing problem. And they were the ones that would make a referral for out of our region. So for instance, CPRI in London, which is the Child and Parent Family Resource Institute. I think I said that right. I always want to say Farm Credit Canada. But anyway, the Family Counseling Center, they also have respite for kids who are on the spectrum. So mainly the autism spectrum is the one I'm referring to, the ASD. So there's respite services that are available, and we have some very good friends who make use of that service, and it is literally almost like a lifeline to them for them to get some caregiver respite. They also do provide individual counseling, and I believe they have a sliding scale. And then there's also a pay-for-fee service there as well. Okay? Lambton Mental Wellness Center. They have, I don't know what happened. Anyway, the Lambton Mental Wellness Center, it's a support place for anyone. So they do a lot of peer support. If you have a brother or a parent or a sister who experiences mental health concerns, they have some really good support services, which is very much needed, because that world can be quite isolating for some people. And so if you fall into that category, feel free to give them a call and find out how you can get connected to other services in that area. They offer a liaison for law and advocacy as well. So quite often, I'm sure you're aware, people who are within the judicial system and have experienced some criminal activity or have participated in criminal activity, there's a mental health component that goes with that, and so they can help bridge that gap. We talked about Blue Water Health. There's also, of course, private counselors. throughout the county. I am one of them. I have my own clinic, and there are many other ones. One is Life Seasons. I don't believe they offered, somebody can correct me, I know somebody here was mentioning how happy they were that was on there. They offer a sliding scale, and I believe they've done a lot of free counseling for people in the community, but I'm not sure where they're at with that, so you would need to contact them. There are other places that offer a greatly reduced rate if you have a farm business registration number, or if you're a member of one of either the OFA or the Christian Farmers Association, or the Farmers Union, right? Is it the three? Yeah, sorry. Okay, so those are our local avenues when you're looking for resources. There's, of course, the online distress that has already been mentioned, the texting number, as well as there's a Lambton mental health crisis number. So it's a local number so that you can be pointed to a local service. So if you call that local crisis number, then they will be able to point you to say, okay, well, there's a walk-in clinic Thursday morning at this location, and this is where you want to go. And so they're able to give you a very local response to whatever needs you have. So, I bet you guys are all ready to stand up and stretch. At this time, there are some yummy goodies at the back. We'd encourage you to stay and visit. We're going to have a quick question answer period. So I'm not sure, Christy, you had mentioned you were okay with that, and Danielle, if I can have you ladies stand up with me. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And then we're just going to close out our evening with a quick thank you. I believe Sarah and Agnes would like to come up and thank the presenters today. So without further ado, does anyone have any questions for us? Yeah.
With mental illness, is it becoming more, or are we becoming more aware, like over the course of history?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I think a lot of people want to know the answer to that, and I'm not sure I can, feel free to, okay. It's twofold. We are most definitely becoming more aware. There was, of course, a number of years where the stigma was so much where we really didn't articulate it at all. And there was a lot of pull up your bootstraps kind of mentality. We have come into an age, though, where some people would say because of the advancement of technology and such, our brains aren't actually able to keep up to some of those advances, right? And so our own coping strategies are much different, number one. There's environmental factors, of course. And the other factor is, of course, our own culture has changed significantly. So, like, how many of you went through, like, for instance, just testing? And my husband's an educator, so I don't want you to think I'm anti-testing or anything like that. However, the amount of stress on some of the kids that I see is extraordinary. And I never experienced the stress that they did at that age, right? So it's a multifactorial issue. And there really isn't a rubber stamp. Well, if you just do this, okay, parent, if you just meet A, and if you just do B, and if you just do C, then your kids will be fine. One of the things we are seeing, and Christy, I totally appreciate your sharing tonight, is we are seeing kids, and we refer to it as a spontaneous suicide. So there really aren't those clear indicators where, you know, I've heard people say to me, oh, well, how did they not pick up on that? Or how did they not know that? And now I'm telling you, you don't always see those signs because there aren't always those signs. So we have kids who are functioning really well, some have been going to counseling and are doing really well, and then they hit a blip on the map, and it's just that one last blip that sends them, you know, into a feeling of complete, you know, I've been working so hard, I've tried so much, and I just can't make this happen. And so there is a clientele of people that we are seeing that it's a very spontaneous decision. So, you know, it's important that we not think that it will never hit our soil, because, you know, there's a lot that I say kids, because I know locally we've been experiencing, you know, a number of teen suicides. So, but of course there's many in the adult population as well. I don't want to say many, but there is in the adult population. Yeah, back here.
I just read an article in Maclean's that said that men age 55, Canadian men age 55 and up are the
leading,
largest growing
yes,
segment
yeah.
of suicide.
Yes, men age 55 and over are the largest. There is actually a higher population. We have to be careful sometimes with some of those stats because some of the medical assisted suicide is falling into that category, which is becoming an option for some people. Over here, yep.
You say that, how did they not see these signs? Hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
My wife and I are in the same boat as
Christy, wow. My heart goes out to people who have experienced it, and actually we live in a world, so we have foster children and our own biological children, and we live in a world where I face things that I never thought in my life I would face, When you hear somebody explain a trauma that they have experienced, and I think, wow, did I grow up in Rainbow Land? Because that was never on my horizon ever. So courageous people for you both to be here and to share that story. And Christy, it is people like you that will make the change so that fewer people experience the pain that you have had to experience. So thank you. Yes.
And I wanted to say, I agree that counseling is very important, whether it's professional or a friend or loved one. But I never heard anybody mention antidepressants. I know maybe you can't talk too much about them, but for a person that's suffering, they might be halfway. You know what I mean? Counseling might take you halfway. The antidepressant could take you the other half.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we didn't actually talk about medication. The stats on medication is actually twofold. It can be very, very helpful. For instance, in some of the kids that I work with, their anxiety level, it's up here all the time. And that medication will lower it enough where they can develop coping skills to then overcome the anxiety that they're experiencing. So absolutely, and I think that's actually what you were touching on, is talk to your doctor. I am very familiar with the medications, and the interesting thing is that we have to be very careful in that we don't rely on that medication, because what we know is that with medication and talk therapy, whether professional or with somebody else, the success rate for most mental illness is actually 90%. It's actually very, very high. Medication alone or counseling alone is not nearly as high. So the two in conjunction are really very effective when it comes to a serious mood disorder. I feel really bad. I can share this. Anybody else? Yeah.
On Danielle's slide, you had your 4 quadrants. How do you help someone that is in that bottom left quadrant get to the top left quadrant that is on medication and therapy?
So, that's not one easy answer. There's not one answer to that. It's so subjective. And that's, I think, the worst part, and I don't know if you would agree with me, of the job in many ways, or just this discussion, is that I wish it was a math equation. But it's going to be so unique, and it takes a lot of time and patience. Again, I know so from experience with my family, my brother has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And times when he was at very high points for him. And we're very lucky right now. He's at a place where he is finishing college and he's doing really well. And he's been in that state of remission for 5 years. But there were a number of years where that wasn't the case, and we didn't know how to support him, to exactly your point. And we try and get medication, or we try and help him with counseling and all these different factors. We all went to counseling and all these different combinations, but there wasn't one answer. And sometimes it's weathering the storm and working through it and finding the last drop of patience to support that person, even when they don't want to be supported. And that takes so many different forms. So there's not one quick answer. I don't know if there's anything that either of you guys would like to add to that, but it's, unfortunately, it's a very subjective and unique path. And so for me, one of the things that I found really helpful was actually going to seek counseling myself and recognizing that I can't help him if he doesn't want to be helped in this moment, but I can help myself, and by strengthening myself, that helped me weather the storm alongside him and understand where he was in his journey. And even when, you know, you see some of the conversations up there about unproductive, unworthy, or whatever it might be, and when I felt that way, or when he may have felt that way, I could kind of start to rationalize, why do I see those stereotypes coming through? Why am I saying this is lazy? Well, is it laziness, or is it something deeper in there that he's struggling on the surface? It comes out as lazy, but deeper down, he's really working to come through it in a different way. So that would kind of be, if the person's not willing, I kind of found it helpful for me to seek and to kind of do some work for myself. And then remember that I was there to listen, and when he was willing to talk, or when he was willing to seek any kind of support, that I was at the forefront for that, to be there with him when he allowed me to.
That's an excellent answer. I think I can just echo that. There isn't the formula. I think it's very important to, you want to maintain that relationship. When we don't have relationship, we lose our influence, right? So we want to do everything we can, like you said, to maintain a relationship with that person. We also want to be sure that, you know, the medication is the right medication, and that we're in contact with that doctor. And one of the things I generally recommend to my clients who are feeling really stuck, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you, is I will give them a 1-month calendar, and I have them, as best they can, them or their family, chart their activities, and they'll chart how much sleep they got, and they'll chart how they were feeling that day, or any other, because oftentimes we have to sometimes look for those patterns as to what's going on besides that. A lot of times we experience people who have they have anxiety, or they have bipolar, and we don't recognize the triggers that are happening. The other thing that we're seeing a lot is people have experienced trauma of one form or another. A lot of times when some people will look at that and say, well, that's no big deal, that's not trauma, Well, it was to that person. Particularly, and I speak mostly of anxiety, because anxiety is the most common one that we see. I think something like 6 in 10 kids are experiencing a diagnosable form of anxiety. So what we do see often, though, is kids who experience anxiety tend to have really big hearts. They tend to be the ones who feel very deeply. So when they feel sad, they feel really sad. But when they feel love, they feel like they've got these great big hearts, right? They are the people that will walk a mile in your shoes with you and carry you, right? They're also the people who, when they feel happy, they can be like, wow, like everything is right with the world. It's all Skittles and rainbows. But unfortunately, the reality is that there's another side to that. And when they feel sad, it can be very sad and very difficult for them. So I think sometimes just recognizing that, and also trying to figure out where those strengths are, where those patterns are, is really helpful. But there really isn't a, this will fix you situation. I was talking earlier here, and we talked about how, a kid with a broken arm, he runs into school and says, can you sign my cast? We don't do that with mental health. And so one of the reasons why people get stuck is simply because it feels like I will never overcome this, because I keep walking into the same environment and nobody wants to sign my cast, right? Nobody wants to champion me along this journey. And so I think that's when everybody here comes tonight, and when you go home and you talk to people, or when you're, at church or at your other committee meetings, we can change that. We can walk alongside with people when we become aware. So I hope that was helpful. Yeah.
Just a comment. I appreciated what Christy had to say. I lost my son to suicide just back in November.
Oh,
at
wow.
17. My brother called today, and he didn't know this, but my 2 nieces, who are sisters, went to the principal's office at their school, and they're only 12 and 11, wanting to do something on mental health. And I think we need to talk about it even earlier than adults, right?
Yeah, and again,
teenagers.
yes, absolutely.
So I had a chance to talk to grade 6 to 8 at one school. It was amazing how much they just took it all in and they're responsive. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this doesn't have to be the grade 9s and 12s, it's actually the 6 to 8s that you have to start talking. I don't know about earlier than that, but they just soaked it in and participated and they really, yeah, it was very amazing that age when they were younger. I wish Jordan had a Jordan story here. I really wish he had one. So that we just got to talk about it. If that made sense about Jordan's story, but I wish he had someone come to their school or just to talk about it. So.
Well, my brother didn't even know that his 2 girls, like they had never talked about it with him, they just went on their own.
Any other questions? Well, yep.
Is there research being done in the agriculture industry, like in the plants, they say, now there's asbestosis and it causes this and this and this for people that have worked in the industry. Is there research being done that some of these chemicals that they've been spraying all the years and stuff is causing, alterations in the brain chemistry to cause some of these depressions?
I can answer that one. Yes, I would say that there has been a great deal of research. I think we have to be really careful about, for sure, about what we do and what we use for certain. I think we run a risk if we end up pinning something on one particular thing, because it really is so multifactorial. The latest research when I was reading, there really isn't a continuum. For instance, if you look at the numbers of urban kids versus rural kids, the numbers are the same. If you look at kids who are on a particular type of farm, so for instance, an organic farm versus a non-organic farm, the numbers are the same. So when we talk about mental health, it's so multifactorial. At least that's my research. It could be very different depending on what you read, right?
And I'm talking more about adults.
Yeah.
Not so much like,
children.
Children.
Yeah. So, yeah, there is some. I know we had talked to somebody who had experienced my fibromyalgia, and they had talked about it potentially being linked to phosphates, and there was some research on that. I think it's an area where more research could be done, for certain. Fibromyalgia is also linked to trauma, and so my sister-in-law was diagnosed with it after the loss of her 4.5-year-old son. So again, that's where you have to be very careful with some of the research, that it's well versed in proper statistical analysis and that sort of thing. So there isn't a definitive link that I'm aware of. Yeah, but thank you. That's a great question. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to Sarah and to Agnes. And please feel free to stay and chat. If you have an individual story or if you have an individual or private question, please feel free to stop and chat with us. I think you guys stay up here.
Could we have you all just stay up here for a minute?
Yeah, no, tough luck.
So I would really like to thank all of you for coming up and speaking tonight, and I think opening yourselves up. I know it's very difficult to do, and hopefully somebody here in the audience heard something and it's helped them, if not a whole lot of people. So we would just really like to thank you and give you some gifts. So also another thing that the LFA has decided to do is that we have made a donation to the Children's Help Phone in memory of Jordan. So that was something that was really important. And another thing that was mentioned to me, if some of you do have the benefits through the OFA, they actually do cover some costs for counseling, etc. So I would really like to thank you for coming, braving the winter. We'll have some refreshments at the back of the room. And thank you all for coming and braving the winter. I feel like this is one way, having meetings like this, open discussion, even the small chats afterwards are ways that we can really start breaking down the stigma and having open and honest conversations and helping people in our communities so that we don't have so that everything, how do I say this? So that hopefully our future is brighter. Thank you.